fifth and I'm assuming final Indiana Jones
It better
movie.
be.
Yeah, it should be. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, the fifth installment in the franchise. And it follows our titular hero, Indiana Jones, as he enters retirement. But he is pulled along on one last adventure with his goddaughter, Helena Shaw, as they are racing against the Nazis again to find Archimedes' dial, or the Antikythera, the Dial of Destiny. We'll just
Yeah.
call it the Dial.
Just the
But
dial, yeah.
yeah, but of course stars Harrison Ford, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Mads Mikkelsen, Toby Jones, John Rhys Davies, Antonio Banderas, Ethan Isidore, and more people than that too. So
Plenty, yeah.
yeah, and in a pretty monumental change for this franchise, it is no longer directed by Steven Spielberg, but is instead directed by James Mangold, who you may know from Logan, 3:10 to Yuma, Ford versus Ferrari, and Walk the Line, I think, and many other films. He's a good director. Written by Jez Butterworth, John Henry Butterworth, and David Cope. Niles, what are your initial non-spoilery thoughts on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny?
God, Nazis again, hey? I just can't get away from them. Just keep coming back. But yeah, I think overall I'm positive on this movie. I wasn't expecting much, especially after Crystal Skull. That definitely set the bar very low. You've seen it more recently than I have, but because you rewatched all the films and prepped for our rewind video. But yeah, I haven't seen it in like 10 years at this point. So
since
it's
it
probably
came
a little
out,
bit.
probably, right?
Yeah, I only saw it in theaters. So I mean,
You want to
it's
feel old? That was 15 years ago.
all right. Well, thanks for that.
Yeah.
I love that. Especially, yeah. Turn it. I mean, yeah, I think the Crystal Skull, for what it is, it's not like it's probably better than I remember it being, but at the time I didn't enjoy it a lot. And I think, I was thinking anything's better than that. And I think this movie definitely does that. It's better than Crystal Skull, but it is tough to meet the like standard that's set by Holy Grail and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like those two are just like amazing. And I think just like are the golden standard for this series. But this one I feel like had a lot of similar tones to it, and it felt in a lot of ways like reminiscent of classic Indiana Jones. Like it felt quippy, it felt clever to me, and it felt fast paced. But obviously it's not a perfect movie, and I don't think this one like holds a candle to Raiders. I think it has some parts that are great, and then some parts where I just rolled my eyes, or it just didn't fit very well. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm slightly positive on this. I liked it and enjoyed watching it a lot, but I don't think I loved it. And sort of my takes on all the movies are Raiders and Last Crusade. I love. They're some of my favorite movies ever. Temple of Doom, I love the atmosphere and the set design and a lot of like sequences in it, but I've never really loved that movie overall. And Crystal Skull I did not like, and I still don't like, except the beginning of that movie is very good. I would say up through a motorcycle chase through the college where Indy works, the movie is great. It's only in the like back half of it where it starts to get kind of dull and sometimes just bad. But it's and I enjoyed this movie more than I enjoy Crystal Skull. I don't think I enjoy it more than I do the first three, in even Temple of Doom, which I like less. But I don't think Dial of Destiny manages to provide any moments that match the highs of any of the previous four films, especially in the action set piece category. There's one really fun chase scene through Tangier, I believe, but I don't think that matches what we've come to expect from an Indiana Jones action sequence. But that being said, I think the narrative works solidly well. Harrison Ford is very good, and it gives us a nice final adventure with Indiana Jones, I think. So and I a lot of people really love it, and a lot of people are liking it, and a lot of people really hate it too. But it's I do want to talk about one sort of bummer about it though, is that it's bombing hard financially. Like,
Oh, really?
mm-hmm. And part
Fun.
of the problem is the budget reportedly is around $300 million, which is too
Ooh,
much.
yeah,
Because I think the movie made like 60 or 70 million over the weekend or something. Not good.
yeah,
And young people are not seeing it. The like over half of the people who bought tickets apparently are 40 plus. So
yeah.
that is I guess something I'm learning about the Indiana Jones franchise is I guess it's not really a thing a lot of young people care about anymore, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it's like I think when those movies were coming out, if you were growing up at that time, like those
Mhm.
movies were just groundbreaking. They're like kind of on the same level as like Star Wars of just like
Right.
how like infamous they were and foundational, I think, for a lot of people's lives were at the time.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think the unfortunate thing for the franchise is that I feel like it's so closely associated with I mean, it's a pro and a con. It's so closely associated with Harrison Ford. Like he is the brand in a lot of
Hmm.
ways. He's the face of it, and he's getting older.
Yeah.
He's not in as many movies now. Like
Hmm.
he's not. To me, it's not surprising that a lot of people aren't seeing it, but it is, yeah. To your point, like, yeah, just it's a different kind of era of cinema when people were growing up and seeing this, and so I think it's the nostalgia that's bringing them in and seeing these kinds of characters
Hmm.
one more time on screen, which I think they're the best part of the movie are the characters. Like I think they really shine here too.
Yeah. And I guess too, it is a thing where this franchise hasn't been present for a lot of younger people, I guess. And
Yeah.
we've talked about this before, how like I don't want franchises I love to be ever present or whatever, but for a lot of people, that's the only way they remember they exist is if they're coming out all the time. And that's a bummer about today's day and age. But I didn't even think about it like when we were kids. I always thought about Indiana Jones as like something that came out when my parents were younger or stuff like that for whatever reason. But Last Crusade came out 5 years before I was born. Like it wasn't
Hmm.
that long before our time, I suppose. So
Yeah, that's true.
yeah. But enough about that. I will say that I think Spielberg's absence can be felt in this movie a little bit. James Mangold is a great director. I like his films a lot, but there is a touch that Spielberg has that Mangold just doesn't. And I think it was pointed out on Twitter. I saw it was like there's blocking in business in scenes, right? Like blocking is where your characters are in relation to each other in the frame,
Hmm.
and business is what they're doing in the frame. And Spielberg was great at having his characters have business. And the example used in this tweet, and I agree with, is in the diner scene in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull when Mutt and Indy are having lunch and like getting to know each other a little bit. There's just an unspoken interaction where the waitress is serving another table. Mutt steals a beer off the tray and then puts it down on the table. And then without a word, Indy puts it back. And it's just,
Mm,
you have you have Indy like parenting him without even realizing he's his son. And there's not as much of that type of stuff in this movie. And I think it's just something
yeah.
that Spielberg is such a master of filmmaking that he's great at that. And yeah.
No, that's a good point. I mean, yeah, I think it doesn't feel like those old Indiana Jones films, and it's hard to get that kind of feeling. But yeah, I think what you're getting at is like weaving those little moments in there that really kind of give it this character, like this movie kind
Yeah.
of rounded out, and it doesn't feel so um generic,
Well, yeah,
like
it
I think
makes
there's
exposition scenes have character. It's like
yes, yeah.
instead of just conveying plot to us, show us details about the character. Like, what are they doing while they're explaining the importance of this artifact or something like that? That's when we
Hmm.
learn how these people act. And Spielberg was really great at that.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true. Well, yeah, it's a shame to hear that there's such a disparity or like a wide range of opinions
mhm.
for this film because yeah, I think yeah, you and I we're in a similar boat. You obviously are not as thrilled with it as I think I am. I don't think it's amazing, but I think it's still solid through and through.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that kind of just speaks to it that you know, after coming off of like Crystal Skull and you're trying to please multiple audiences here simultaneously of like, well, we need to draw in the new audience and we need to appeal to like the nostalgic fan base. So it's kind of like, how do you please everyone?
Yeah, I don't think
Unfortunately.
this movie is trying to draw in new audiences at all. Honestly,
Well,
I
just to make money. That's
well, to
just
make
what I meant. Yeah.
you would think, but like from a story point of view or a character point of view, like I don't think there's anything here that would like entice a new audience member who doesn't love Indiana Jones to see it, and maybe that is part of the problem from a business sense. But I don't think trying to appeal to that new audience is necessarily the right move. Like I hope that this movie existing causes young people who haven't seen them to go back and watch the old Indiana Jones movies
Yeah.
because they're great, and that it like I've never met someone who doesn't love them, who's seen them. And I will say there is the decently fun Tangier chase, which I talked about earlier, and there's a really big creative swing in this movie that I respect a lot, but I don't know if it totally lands the way they want it to, and I can't elaborate without spoilers, so we'll save that for later. But it is riskier than I thought it would be going into this. I thought it was going to be kind of a Rise of Skywalker situation where they're trying to do the greatest hits, or even The Force Awakens to a lesser extent, even though The Force Awakens is good and Rise of Skywalker is bad. But I respect the movie for taking bigger swings than I thought it was going to. And I don't want to come across as negative on the film because I do like it. I enjoyed watching it. I don't even know what I wanted from this that it didn't deliver. But I think, and I said it with Crystal Skull, and I say it all the time, if you end a movie in your franchise with your characters riding off into the literal sunset, that's the end. You have to stop. Pirates of the Caribbean and Indiana Jones are two great examples of that, because this is now the third movie that is sort of our farewell to Indiana Jones, and I don't think Crystal Skull or this managed to top the end of Last Crusade.
Oh yeah, I mean, I haven't seen that movie in forever, but it's hard to top the originals and just like what really made this franchise so great. But yeah, like I think that is kind of like the problem with this series too, is like I don't think you or I asked for it. We didn't really want it. You know, it was like we got multiple endings for this character already, and like depending on whether or not you like Crystal Skull or not, you could just be like, well, I'm gonna ignore that movie and just focus on Holy Grail. That was the ending for Indiana Jones. So I don't need another. Yeah, Last Crusade. Thank you. I'm just synonymous with Monty Python in my head. You know, it's the title, you know, because we're searching for the Grail. So I'm just like, Indiana Jones and the Holy Grail. Like, no, it's Last Crusade. But you know, I think it's a good one overall, and I think that there are some moments too where like the effects look all right, and there's sometimes where they don't too. Which is kind of a bit of a problem in my opinion for this film. Like not getting too far ahead, but like there's like an underwater scene that I don't think looks too great. There's also some times where they're flying, or like Harrison Ford's de-aged, where it's like,
that's in the trailer, so like you know it's coming. It's not a spoiler.
Yeah,
the de-aging, we'll talk about it more in a minute in spoilers, but it varies pretty wildly in quality. But yeah, I would say like final non-spoilery thoughts for me. It feels like a nice farewell to a character, the character of Indy, a farewell that we didn't necessarily need because we've gotten it a couple times. But the movie is pretty fun, but not as memorable as I would like it to be, I would say. What about you?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. You know, I think the story stands on its own. It feels akin to the classic films, but different in its own way, and it's hard to top Raiders or Last Crusade. So
yeah. All right, let's do some spoilers.